Buenos dias, damas y caballeros. This is Toby Eunice of a Gypsy Kiss. Stick with me for a couple of seconds, and I will tell you why Shelley Carney and I will never look for Fenn's treasure in Yellowstone Park. So sometime during the day-to-day, as I was out running around, I got a Google alert for Forrest Fenn. And when I got home this evening, this was the article that it referred me to. It was on a website called How Stuff Works under their adventures section. It was written by a journalist whose name is Cherise Threewitt, I think is the pronunciation. It was published today, and that's, of course, why I got the alert. It talks about Fenn's treasure, and it highlights the Forrest Fenn's treasure in the context of Yellowstone Park. And then it talks about some of the deaths. It talks about Fenn. It connects him to the National Park Service, et cetera, et cetera. But it speaks about him in a relatively sympathetic way. But about halfway down the article, there's a quote from a woman whose name is Kathy Cupper, who's identified as a public affairs specialist for the National Park Service. And it refers to a question that was probably asked by the journalist of what about if the treasure is found on parkland? And Cupper basically says only Fenn can claim it. And I'll read her quote. Federal property management regulations and policies issued by the OMB, or Office of Management and Budget, and GSA, or General Services Administration, govern how the National Park Service handles abandoned, lost, or unclaimed property, says Cupper via email. In this case, the most appropriate regulation would be the one related to property under 36 CFR Code of Federal Regulations 2.22. It states that leaving something in the park for longer than 24 hours is considered abandoned property and is prohibited. If found, it should be turned over to the superintendent, who will hold onto it for a limited period of time until it is claimed by the owner. If no owner comes forward, it is disposed of according to our policies and regulations. And it sounds to me like the disposition doesn't include returning it to the finder. So she also talks about how the policies are designed to protect the wildlife and environment. So I went to that section of the code, 36 CFR section 2.22, and it's entitled Title 36, Parks, Forests, and Public Property, Part 2, Resource Protection, Public Use and Recreation, section 2.22, Property. And the first several paragraphs are under property are what is prohibited when it comes to property in the park. But the one that struck me as most interesting was paragraph 4. And I'm going to read it to you in its entirety. The reason I'm going to read it is because, although I'm not an attorney, nor do I play an attorney on TV, if I was going to hide a treasure, and I was looking for a place to hide it, and I want to make it available in a place that got people out into nature, and that's what I expressed to my attorney, and my attorney came back at me with this paragraph, I would change my mind about hiding it in a national park, if that was my intent to begin with. So let me read the paragraph to you. The owner of record, in this case it would be Forrest Fenn, is responsible and liable for charges to the person who has removed, stored, or otherwise disposed of property impounded pursuant to this section. Or the superintendent may assess the owner reasonable fees for the impoundment and storage of property impounded pursuant to this section. What that means in the fewest possible words in plain English language is that the costs of impoundment of property recovered by anyone, whether it's me or you or anyone else, is the responsibility of Forrest Fenn. Fenn is liable for all the charges associated with the treasure being abandoned, recovered, and put in storage pursuant to whatever their rules and regulations are. If my attorney, if I was hiding a treasure, and if my attorney had informed me of this paragraph, that would have been enough for me to say to myself, I'm not going to hide a treasure in this case, the national park, but because if you remember what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where we talked about all the National Park Service system assets, I wouldn't hide it in anything that began with the word national, because I'd run up against this paragraph. Now, that would be dependent, I suppose, on whether or not the finder of the abandoned property were to announce that they found the property, the abandoned property, on a national park. So, but you know, I have a sense that Fenn wanted to make this as simple as possible for everyone, including him and probably including his family after he were to pass away. He wanted to make it simple for, he's always said he wanted to make it simple for the searcher, the finder, and he probably wanted to make it simple for himself. So to me, this is an indication that I probably don't want to waste my time looking in not only Yellowstone National Park, but no other National Park Service asset. So I think Shelley's going to be happy to hear this, because she didn't feel like she wanted to go to Yellowstone to look for the treasure anyway. So there we are. We're not going to Yellowstone. I suppose that'll make some people feel better. And I'm not recommending, of course, what you do, but I'm going to strongly recommend that you click on the links below in the description box below and at least read the articles and ask yourself, does this make sense to you? Okay, thanks for watching. We will see you sometime next week, I'm sure.